you probably appreciate, there were many honours conferred on Sir Winston Churchill from all over the world, whether they were memorials in the forms of statues or buildings. But anecdotally, the story goes that in 1962, the Duke of Edinburgh asked Sir Winston what type of memorial he would like set up for the world to remember him after his passing. The concept of an unusual type of memorial to be set up after his death pleased him very much, and he suggested something like the Rhodes Scholarship, but of course open to all sorts of fields and all sorts of people, not just academics, which allowed it to be opened up on a much wider basis. The Trust aims to provide an opportunity for Australians to travel overseas, conduct research in a chosen field that is not readily available in Australia. It also aims to reward proven achievement of talented and deserving Australians, with further opportunity to pursue excellence and for the enrichment of Australian society. As Jane mentioned, no prescribed qualifications are required in order to apply for a Churchill Fellowship. The subject of the proposed project is limitless, provided there is a benefit to Australia and it's evident, and there is a willingness to share your research and findings with the Australian community. My fellowship was called the Gallagher Bequest Churchill Fellowship, to investigate exceptional public and creative learning programs at leading multi-art centres in the United Kingdom and the United States, and it's a fellowship that's been made possible by a family bequest from Hobart. I could easily tell you a story from every day of my fellowship, from the people I met and the places that I visited and the places I experienced. I wouldn't be bored, but I'm sure you would be. In brief, it was a far greater learning experience than I'd initially set out to achieve. Here I was walking into places like MoMA in New York, the Tate in London, National Theatre. I was walking in to speak to the education officers, and I was walking in to speak to the people who were running the secondary programs from what are frontline programs of those major institutions. And the people I was going to see, I'm pretty sure they never received any visitors, especially international visitors. People would go to those institutions to see curators and directors and writers and managers. It was quite a novelty to be going into these institutions and seeing the education staff. A lot of the times they didn't know what to do with me. We just spent time doing the same programs that children were doing or adults were doing at the time. It was an extraordinary opportunity and opened a lot of doors, and I mean that metaphorically as well as physically. I was actually left to my own devices for a day in the back room of the Tate Britain, so here I was, this kid from Burnie wandering around this extraordinary institution.
It was 70 years ago, and he picked up a shell on that beach as a small child. And I guess it could be said that he didn't realise at the time that it would be the start of something that would delight a whole community, and indeed a city and a region. Now that shell I'm talking about would be the beginning of a backyard collection that was to become a Launceston College exhibition at Grammar, a Ridgely Farmyard Museum. How many remember that? So we've got a few 100-year-olds in the room.
It was on a farm, it wasn't a farm.
And eventually a fully blown and recognised town museum of national and regional significance. And believe you me, it is of national significance. But it didn't happen as easily as I'm making it sound. That shell was also the beginning of a struggle for the next 60 years to gain civic recognition. His latest book, Power of Purpose, details the highs and lows of this struggle and demonstrates Peter's dogged faith in its future and his persistence and perseverance, his commitment and his passion to achieve this. And you can still all hear me, hopefully. Arguably, he should never have had to confront the torment and the barriers that were thrown down to complete the transition of the Petfalls Museum to the Pioneer Village Museum. After negotiating a fire sale price with the then council. However, that's history, and you'll read about it in the book. I first read Peter's early proofs of the Power some years ago, and I was impressed. In fact, I was consumed with the sheer honesty, the fairness, and the attention to detail. We all know what Peter's like. We know that if he writes something, it will be right. At my suggestion, he delayed the publishing of the book to bring it up to date, that is to 2014, so I'll take full responsibility for delaying the launch until now. I've known Peter personally for almost 60 years. When he moved with his parents and his brother Stuart to the beautiful Willowvale property at Ridgely, I learned about the museum he was to set up in the old building on the property. Many of us would remember that museum, I'm sure. Near the Petfalls, and hence it was called the Petfalls Museum. One of the first places I took my Queensland fiancée, Margaret, to, more than half a century ago, during an early visit to Burnie, was the Petfalls Museum. Isn't that what you normally do? There she met Peter, and she was overawed by the amount of paraphernalia and the cobwebs and all that went with it. Tonight's new book is one of hundreds of books and papers Peter has contributed over the years, particularly in relation to Burnie, to stamp himself together with the late Kerry Pink and Wilfred Winter among the area's outstanding historians. Many of his other papers have been of national significance, and they do take up several pages. That he chose, as an outsider from Launceston, to dedicate his enthusiasm and soul to the Burnie project is something for which we should eternally be thankful and grateful.
That's my problem at the minute. What else you got there? You didn't get mine out of my tubing
No,
case.
I didn't. Well, I thought the hole was a bit too big.
Too small for that.
Too small.
Yeah, you get a bit of leakage around that too, but I mean, fix that up with a bit of Teflon tape.
I reckon that's too small.
Get back to what you had. Who puts oil?
Yeah.
I like a recorder.
Plays like a bagpipe.
Enough hands. graves tour of the Ridgely Cemetery. Have you come here tonight to hear gruesome stories? Maybe, yes. Have you come to see a ghost? Maybe. You're here to find out who is in these graves. Well, maybe my tales might scare you, and maybe you might see a ghost that no one else does. But at the least I can tell you about who is lying beneath our feet. And yes, we find ourselves here tonight amongst the mortal remains of and possibly the souls of those folk who have lived and toiled and procreated and died in the vicinity of the Ridgely Cemetery, from the early days of settlement until the present. As we move around the cemetery tonight, we'll pause to remember the individuals and the families that are lying here. We will discover the final resting places of these folk. We will think of their station in life, their circumstances, and the particulars of their passing. Whether their grave markers are grand or humble, we'll take this opportunity to place a flower, or a sprig of rosemary, or a thought on their grave as a sign of our respect for them. 3 weeks ago, we started the Ghosts and Graves tours at the Wivenhoe Cemetery. Not the oldest burial ground in early Emu Bay, but we did find a number of significant individuals and families, such as Captain William Jones, John Mylan, the undertaker, and the Rouse family. Somerset and Wynyard also have old cemeteries with early pioneers. At Somerset are the Hilders, the Von Bibras, the Harnets, the Raggs and the Mackendies. At Jenner Street in Wynyard we talked about the Stuttards and the Kings of Table Cape, Captain Littler of Anzac fame, and Richard Guttridge and his legacy. One of our themes has been the variety of causes of death. You might remember that I've mentioned that there are any number of causes of death, and we've talked about those. Many of those we have mentioned simply passed away in a timely fashion when they achieved a respectable old age. However, there are also many children laid to rest in these cemeteries, and Ridgely's not the least of those. Some died of diseases which today are curable or even preventable. Others were the victims of accidents which may or may not have been avoidable. Falls from horses, falling off a cliff, drownings in the river or the sea were all too common. Young adults too featured in our talks because of work-related accidents, such as being struck by falling trees, being run over by a bullock wagon, being crushed against a tree by a cart loaded with palings, or being caught in a bushfire. We heard graphic details of shipwrecks right here on the northwest coast and on the west coast of Tasmania. 5 wrecks in 5 weeks, rated to mention in the papers of the day. Now I can only guess why you have come again tonight for another walk and talk in the cemetery. Perhaps it is to hear the gory details from a coroner's inquest. Perhaps it is to learn some of the history of the graveyard in your town. Perhaps you would like to let your thoughts wander back to the good old days, or the bad old days, of horse and cart for the weekly journey into town, of wooden ships plying the coastal and intercolonial trade, of wood stoves and kerosene lamps for cooking and lighting in the home, of the saw and axe before chainsaws, of the hand-scribed letter before mobile phones and emails, of milking the cow before breakfast or before going to school instead of a quick call into the supermarket. Perhaps you are hoping to hear something of an ancestor of yours and to learn how they came to end up here in this cemetery at Ridgely. Your ancestors, our pioneers, are lying here. In a country graveyard, in a paddock on the side of a hill, surrounded by the farms of neighbours and friends. They are lying side by side with their family members, neighbours and friends. No matter how they died, this is their final resting place, and we are here tonight because we want to know more about them and not forget them.
Dearest Isabel, I can't stop thinking about the time I spent with you.
Dearest Tom, when I first saw you, I felt like I knew you, and I couldn't stop seeing my life with you.
To be loved by you allowed me to feel again. What can I do? What should I do?
Can't just be a coincidence that she showed up.
She's a lovely baby, but you can't keep her.
She needs us. We're not doing anything wrong. I know that you're going to be a wonderful father.
For my dada, with love forever and ever and ever and ever.
What's your name?
Lucy.
Lucy. It was lovely to meet you. Hi.
My sister had a terrible tragedy. Her husband and their baby daughter were lost at sea. You would have been your girl's age by now.
We have to tell people it's her mother.
I'm a mother.
Someone knows that my girl is alive.
You'll be safe. I'll protect you, I promise. You saw what we've done to her.
It's too late.
One day, this will all feel like a dream. With love forever and ever